Hey everybody, welcome to this last talk about fruit of the Holy Spirit based on Galatians 5:22. The last fruit that I'm going to speak about is self-control. No, I won't for now. Walter Mischel was an Austrian-born American psychologist who earned the nickname the Marshmallow Man. Why? Well, because of a test that he devised. In the 60s, he began testing various 5-year-olds to see how they would respond to being left alone with a marshmallow for 15 minutes with the instructions not to eat it, and the promise that if they didn't eat it, they'd be given 2. Yum. He then went on to see what would happen, and after that, he tracked what happened to those children as they grew up. The implications being suggested that those who waited for the 15 minutes were then more successful in all kinds of parameters in their later life. Now, truth be told, other researchers since then have challenged both the methodology and the findings. But let me ask you, would you have waited? Would I have waited? Self-control. The Greek meaning behind the words that we have in the English version of the New Testament refers to dominion within. It's a sense of order internally, which then works out in external words and actions. In Proverbs 25:28, we can read these words: like a city whose walls are broken down is a person who lacks self-control. Yesterday, in all that wonderful sunshine, I was out cycling in the city. At one stage, I was cycling along a road which went parallel to where part of the city wall used to be. Of course, there's no walls now. Anything can come in, anything can come out. There's no barrier. This verse in Proverbs takes that kind of imagery and applies it to our lives. If we have no self-control, anything can come in, anything can come out. Paul refers to self-control in 1 Corinthians 7 verse 9, in this case in relation to sexual activity. It's not that he's saying sexual desire is wrong in itself. There's plenty in the Bible to show it's a gift from God. But we're not to be ruled by sexual desire. There's to be self-control in our lives. There's a right place for the expression of sexual desire. There's other ways that the Bible refers to self-control. For example, Paul writing to a young leader called Timothy about the appointment of elders in a local church says that one of the characteristics they should have is that they're self-controlled. To another leader called Titus, Paul gives instructions for different members of the community, and he calls on Titus to urge young men to be self-controlled. The Apostle Peter, in his first letter, calls for the hearers of that letter to be clear-minded and self-controlled so that you can pray. 1 Timothy 4:7. It's also a quality that he refers to in his second letter. Listen to these words from 2 Peter 1 verses 5 to 7. Make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. Now the phrase here, make every effort, suggests some action on our part. Now I don't think that contradicts the thought that self-control is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Peter, even the list that he gives that I just read to us, in the context just a few verses earlier, writes these words of God: His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. So the Lord's work through his Spirit and our being purposeful about self-control, the two go together. Now, self-control, I don't think is the same as our being obsessed with trying to control everyone or everything else. You know, if there are elements of those types of things in our lives, I think it's probably good to pray and ask the Lord what's going on in our lives. Maybe to seek help from others to explore it. It may be because of some bad experiences that have gone on in our lives in the past. And so we really feel like we have to control everything. Some of it might just be a reflection of our personality, of course. There could be all kinds of things. And if you're someone who's listening and you feel you do have to be absolutely in control of everything, maybe it's good to talk to someone about that. And I know maybe that could feel risky. That feels like a letting go of some control in itself. But I encourage you, talk with someone about it, as well as praying about it. Self-control as a fruit is something where we avoid impulsiveness. That is, a giving in all the time to sudden desires, to whims and inclinations. You know, maybe some of us, we've got into some bad habits. Maybe we give in impulsively to some things in our lives that aren't doing us any good. Perhaps these have even become addictive. Self-control as a fruit may be something that seems a million miles away from our lives. In fact, being out of control, perhaps if we're honest, is more like how it is right now. Is there any hope? Yeah, I believe there is. I'll come back to that shortly. Now, in saying that self-control is not impulsiveness, I do want to make the point that impulsiveness is not the same as spontaneity. Spontaneity can be a really wonderful, positive thing in people's lives. And I get it, some of us are more spontaneous in the way we approach life. Some of us are more planners. I'm more of a planner. But we need both, and probably in each of our lives we need both. There are plus and minus points to being a planner, plus and minus points to spontaneity. But of course, that's not the focus of the talk here. But I want to suggest that if we're going to grow in self-control, we need to be purposeful in that. Whether we see ourselves as planners, as more spontaneous, or a mixture of both. Self-control doesn't just happen. I asked just a few sentences or so back, is there any hope, especially if we feel we're out of control? Can we grow in self-control? I believe we can, and I've just got a few points I'd like to suggest. Firstly, I want to encourage us, as with any of the fruit of the Spirit, to ask for the Lord's help. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. As the Apostle Paul wrote a little bit later in Galatians 5:25, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. The Holy Spirit is at work in our lives and we're followers of Jesus. We're not on our own in this. We can ask God for help to grow in self-control as well as other fruit. Listen to these words that Paul wrote to Timothy. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. 2 Timothy 1:7. The word translated here, self-discipline, can also be translated to refer to sound-mindedness, to moderation and self-control. You know, in asking for the Lord's help for self-control to grow more in our lives, to be more in our lives, you know, we may need to be honest and ask for some forgiveness of some things which we've done, where we've sinned, we've done wrong, and we've chosen to go a certain way. We've chosen to give in to certain habits. We've chosen to get caught up in a certain way of being. And maybe in part of our asking God for help, we need to turn from those things and seek to follow him, with his help, of course. So asking the Lord for his help. Second thing I want to suggest is make some choices to do what you can. In 1 Peter 2 verse 11, we can read of a call to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. You know, I think such abstinence is an active thing. It's not just passive. I know, for example, if you've been struggling with pornography, a very practical thing that you could do is put accountability and filter software onto your computer and onto any other devices that you use, as well as maybe opening up to some others and seeking to deal with the root issues behind it of why you've become drawn and addicted, possibly, to pornography. Maybe it's an issue with some food that you're overindulging in. Perhaps there's a way that you buy less of it, or you cut it out completely, and maybe then at a later date slowly reintroduce it and see what happens. Just a very practical example with food. Maybe sometimes turn your phone off, turn your laptop off, turn off your iPad, whatever it is. You don't respond to everything that's out there. To have some time out. You know, the world's not going to crash to a halt if you unplug for a while. So make some choices about self-control. And that links into the third point about practice exercising self-control. Why not learn to speak less? Oh, sorry. Why not maybe don't take the last cookie on the plate? Delay a purchase. Practice delayed gratification. Maybe even ask sometimes, do I actually need this? That's a whole topic in itself, but delay can be a good thing. Even if you are staying on your phone, your iPad, whatever your device is, don't respond so quickly to a WhatsApp message, to a tweet, to an email. Besides that being wisdom, and maybe saving us from sending things hastily or saying something, typing something we might regret, it can be another way of exercising self-control. And I get it, of course, we're at work, there are maybe emails and so on we need to respond to. But even then, why not take a few moments to just pause, take a deep breath, maybe send a quick prayer, if you like, to God to ask us to give wisdom how to respond, rather than just automatically, without any control, just responding. Those were just some suggestions for practicing, exercising self-control. So ask the Lord for his help. Make some choices to do what you can. Practice exercising self-control. And lastly, I want to say, ask for help with what seems to be beyond your control. Within this, of course, pray to the Lord about it. Ask for understanding of what is causing a lack of self-control. Believe for God's help to bring change. But very often I think some of the answers to our prayers comes by us having the courage and the humility to open up and be accountable to others. Yes, maybe if they believe in praying, to pray with us, but maybe also have people to check in with us, to hold us accountable, not in some heavy way and they're policing our lives, but because we have a relationship of trust, they can ask us questions because we know that they care about us, and they can even ask us some tough questions, which is what needs to happen probably in all of our lives sometimes, especially if we're going to grow in a fruit like self-control. Perhaps we need to talk with others about what's triggering a lack of self-control in our lives. Maybe it happens in particular situations, or when we experience internal pain in our lives, that we default to ways of escaping which really don't involve the fruit of self-control. Maybe it's good to ask, what's behind that? What's causing that to happen? That's where outside help can be a real benefit, such as a trained counsellor or a spiritual director or a psychologist. And, that can depend, of course, on what the situation is. I've benefited from all of those types of help in my life, including into this fruit of self-control. Ask the Lord's help, make some choices, do what you can, practice exercising self-control, but ask for help when it's for something that seems to be beyond your control. And in all of those things, remember that God is gracious and compassionate. He's slow to anger. He's rich in love. Christ has grace and truth. He brings both. And we can come to him with confidence and ask for his help. That's just a few thoughts about self-control in our lives. As I conclude not just this talk about self-control, but this whole series about fruit of the Spirit, I want to encourage us. Yes, we have a part to play in growing in all of those fruit. But let's remember also the presence and the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives and through our lives to help us to be more Christ-like as we seek to follow Jesus in our everyday life in 2020. I hope something from today, but also this series, has been a help for us in thinking about the relevance and the value and the richness, the fruitiness of the fruit of the Holy Spirit in our lives. Thanks for listening.